All right, go ahead and have a seat. That's fine. Thanks. While our candidates get settled, I want to welcome you. Good afternoon, and I'm Teresa Bohnen, President of the St. Cloud Area Chamber of Commerce and a member of this club, and also your moderator for today's candidate forum for state representative seats in District 14. I just want to let you all know, I know there's some guests here, and we welcome all of our guests, whether you ate lunch or not. If you did eat lunch and you are not a Rotarian or you're a visiting Rotarian, you need to pay $10. So I just wanted to mention that. That was all on kind of the honor system. And otherwise, they're going to bill me, and you don't want to see that happen. All right. Joining me today are District 14A incumbent Representative Tama Theis and her candidate that is opposing her, Dan Wolgamott, and also our District 14B incumbent Representative Zachary Dorholt. And Zach's candidate opposing is Jim Knoblach. So welcome to all of you, and thank you very much for coming and being a part of this. And I would welcome you to be a part of the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee as well. All right, so the purpose of this forum is to make candidates more accessible to voters and provide a forum for participation and feedback in the political process. The format will be as follows. I'll ask some questions regarding our candidates' opinions on state issues most important to businesses in our community, and the candidates will be allowed 1 to 2 minutes to address each question. We have more questions than time, so your succinctness is appreciated, and we may also allow rebuttal at the moderator's choice, depending on your responses. So if you're responding to something and you specifically address something that your opposition has addressed and they should have a rebuttal time, then I'll be granting that to them. Also, if you have a burning question, and we invited them by email last week and I did not get any, but if you have a burning question and you'd like to write it down, please do that, and you can either just bring it up to me along the side here. Don't be shy, and we'll try to work those in as we can. All right, and I would ask you to make sure that your questions address all of the candidates and pertain to state business issues at hand. And our Vice President of the Chamber, Gail Ivers, is acting as our timekeeper today. She's right here in front, so she'll be signaling you when you have 30 seconds left and then when your time has expired. And I ask you then please to finish your sentence and stop at that point. All right, are you clear on the rules? Then we're going to start, and I have these in kind of a rotating order. So Tama, I'll have you answer the first question first. And this actually is just a 1 minute, and it's to discuss what unique capabilities, strengths, and skills that you bring to the job of state representative. And in short, why should people vote for you on November 4th? Tama?
I think one of the biggest things I bring to the table is a different perspective. I think most of us know that it's quite a male-dominated area, and having some women there really makes a big difference. When we get together, we really have some wonderful ideas, and we really come to a consensus quite quickly. But also because I'm a business owner, and Greg and I have owned businesses since we've been married practically, that brings a different perspective as well, a more well-rounded area. And then with some of the organizations that I belonged with, we've volunteered forever and been on boards, and so the whole process lends itself where I'm a little bit more familiar with it, but also knowing that it isn't just my way or your way, it's our way, and trying to find a way to get that done. And I think that's one of the greatest things that we can bring, is the fact that we can work together, and it isn't just necessarily my way or your way.
Thank you. Dan.
My name is Dan Wolgamott, and I live here in St. Cloud with my wife, Nicole, and our daughter, Lily. I'm in addition to being a dad, I'm a high school assistant football coach, so I work with kids in our community on a daily basis, and I have a real estate business with Century 21 in Wade Park. And through my business and through my experiences in volunteering, I can appreciate that here in our community, we've got many different groups of people. We have seniors, we have students, we have business owners, we have workers, and families from all economic backgrounds. I'm the best person to represent our district in St. Paul because I have the energy and the enthusiasm and the experience to represent all of our community and go to the legislature and tackle our real priorities.
Great, thank you. Zach Dorholt, please.
Sure. Some people don't know my full-time job. I'm a therapist at the mental health center, so I'm a professional listener. It's what I do all day. I work with some of the folks you might consider to be living in the shadows of life. I work with people who live under the bridge sometimes. I work with also people who might be members of your family suffering from mental illness. On the other hand, I'm also part of one of a small business, the Old Capitol Tavern in Sauk Rapids there. And when I make these decisions, when I went to St. Paul and when I hopefully go back, I'm weighing both from a social perspective or a social services perspective as well as a small business perspective. And I bring both of those in every time I make a decision. And I hope that you recognize that and look forward to hearing more from you down the trail.
And Jim Knoblach.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think I know a lot of you here since I'm in Rotary and the Chamber and come to the Government Affairs meeting regularly. But for those that don't know me, I was born and raised in St. Cloud. I've been very active in the volunteer community here in a large number of areas, United Way, Boy Scouts, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, St. John's University. And if I can throw in a short commercial, my wife and I, for the 6th consecutive year, will be hosting the Salvation Army homeless shelter fundraiser at our home on October 9th. So tickets are still available if you want to see me. In terms of what I think I can bring to the legislature and to this position, as I think most of you know, I was in the legislature some years ago. I left in 2006. One of the things I've noticed that our area has or has not, just by happenstance, is we have the least senior legislative delegation for an area in the state. I would get all my old seniority back if I came back. I have a lot of negotiating and other business skills that I think I can bring to the legislature.
Great, thank you. You know, I noticed some of you are really stretching. There are some extra seats up here. If you want to take a shift or if you just want to shift your seat around so you can see better, you're welcome to do that. This will be a quick question too. This is just for 1 minute. So if you're elected, what will be your 2 top priorities as you face the 2015 legislature and why? And we'll start with Dan.
If elected to our legislature, my top 2 priorities will be strengthening our schools and investing in our transportation needs. I'm a dad. My daughter Lily goes to 2nd grade at Oak Hill Elementary. I see my neighbor in the audience. We go to walk our kids to the bus stop every morning, and we know that when we're investing in our kids, when we're investing in our schools, we're investing in our future. Same goes with higher education. I see familiar faces from St. John's, St. Ben's, from SCTCC, St. Cloud State. We're investing in higher education. We're investing in our future workforce, which is good for our business. So first part would be education. Next then is investing in a comprehensive transportation package. Oftentimes we'll be driving around and we'll go over some potholes, and our daughter Lily calls them rocky roads. And you don't have to be a 7-year-old to know that we've got to make investments in our state's transportation and infrastructure needs. So if elected, my top 2 priorities will be strengthening our schools and investing in our transportation system.
Great, thank you. And I'm gonna keep you grouped in the district area that you represent so people have you straight. So Tama, you're next.
Okay. Higher education is something that I'm very pleased to be on that committee. It's been a very rewarding experience thus far, and yet there's a lot of work to do. One of the things that we're finding is that the kids, when they graduate, are not meeting reading and math standards. And so with that being said, my journey has almost been backwards to see how we can fix that. So education is going to be a thing, both higher ed and looking to E through 12, to see what measures we can do to help strengthen that. Plus, we also have a lot of diversity in our community, and St. Cloud District acts more like a metro area than it does a rural area. So that again will be a focus. And also transportation. We spend money on new projects, but we really need to get back into the maintenance part of it. I know the city of St. Cloud had a similar plan where it was some of the money wasn't spent there, and now they're trying to catch up. And that's something we need to do as a state. We need to get back into the maintenance, fix the roads and bridges. Working on the 94, getting another lane is always a huge, huge thing, and I will continue to work on that.
Thank you. Jim Knoblach.
Well, of course, there's always lots of important priorities, and it's hard to pick out a couple. But I would say transportation and creating good jobs while improving our state's economy. On the transportation side, I think everyone, whether you're Republican or Democrat, on a bipartisan basis, there's been a lot of talk about how the last legislature has actually failed to move the ball forward in the transportation area. You know, we spent $900 million on a public works bill, but only $35 million of it was for roads and bridges. And all the potholes that you saw around after this last winter are just evidence that we have not been investing in even basic maintenance, much less the expansion that we need for things like I-94. In the whole economic area, I think I saw in the Star Tribune this morning that the average family income in Minnesota is actually still less than it was 4 years ago. The policies that we've seen from the Dayton administration, from the Democratic legislature, have not been creating the jobs and improving our economy the way that we need to be doing.
Thank you. Zach, your 2 top priorities.
Transportation, of course, number one. I think no matter what party comes back is going to say transportation is their number one priority. And how we do that is probably going to be some differences. I'm willing to make some investments. And we did do a lot for transportation this past year. May not look like, but we created the Corridors of Commerce program. I was the chief author for getting that lane from St. Michael to Rogers, and Governor Dayton made that a priority. We went above and beyond what, MnDOT wasn't a big fan of that. And we said, no, we're going to move something forward here. And yeah, $80 million pothole bill. I know it doesn't fill everything, but we have had 2 incredibly horrible winters on the roads. Second of all, my priority is a little more complex, but it's related to education and integration of mental health support so that our teachers can teach and so that our kids get the other help they need inside the schools. It's just going to be so much more efficient. We're moving in that direction, but there's still a lot more work to be done.
Thank you. Then, Zach, you can hold on to that because you're going to start the next one. And this is a 2-minute answer, so you have twice as much time to get your ideas out. Minnesota's tax structure is often cited for its impact on our ability to attract new businesses into the state, which would create jobs. Businesses and persons of accumulated wealth are reportedly leaving the state in search of better tax climates. So how would you make the tax environment more competitive for existing and future businesses and retirees in our state?
Well, I hear the frustrations of creating that 4th tier tax bracket income in that question. And we say reportedly leaving the state. But we've gained over 160,000 jobs since Governor Dayton took office. Forbes magazine rated us 8th best in the nation for economy, and CNBC the 6th best in the country for business. We've taken these investments and we've done wise things with them. We invested in higher ed and LinkedIn. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I know a lot of you have a LinkedIn profile. We're the 2nd best place in the world to recruit to find quality education college graduates. So I think we're doing wise things with the tax structures that we created in the past. Yes, there are obviously more efficiencies. I could rattle off a bunch with owning a bar and restaurant, and there's no big clean answer. But I support the changes we made, and I think we've done an incredible job making those investments show. I'm always open to any suggestions you have, and I'll keep it at that.
Thank you. Jim, do you need me to repeat, or you got the question?
I got the question. Sure. Well, taxes and spending are linked. The fact is that fortunately in Minnesota, unlike the federal government, we do have to have a balanced budget. And so the answer to the tax question, first of all, comes back to spending. Once upon a time, not too many years ago, just a few years ago, in fact, we had gotten out of the top 10 in spending per capita in the United States. But now the U.S. Census Bureau, as of last year, says that we are the 4th highest spending state in the country on a per capita basis. We are way up there as you compare ourselves to other states. Look what happened over the last 2 years. We increased spending 12% from last budget to this next budget. That, I believe, is a higher percentage increase in spending than the state has ever had. Now, certainly were there some good investments in that? Yes, there were. And there should have been some good investments because we went into the session with a $600 million surplus, but then we promptly increased taxes by $2 billion. We increased taxes far more than really was needed. Now you look at the tax structure, there's a lot of different taxes you could look at, and I could spend a lot of time talking about this on a bipartisan basis. A lot of people feel that our corporate tax at a 9.8% top rate is among the very highest in the country. If you couple it with the federal tax, it's among the very highest in the world. There's been a lot of bipartisan efforts to reduce that. I talk about some minimum taxes that were implemented this last time that affect small businesses that haven't gotten much play. I know small business people that made no money last year that because they had to increase the minimum taxes, still had to fork over a couple $1,000s in increased taxes that they never had to pay before. And of course, we are hearing from all sorts of accountants and financial planners that more people are talking about moving out of this state than ever before.
Thank you. Tama, you want me to repeat the question, or are you okay?
Why don't you repeat it?
I'll repeat it one more time. Minnesota's tax structure is often cited for its impact on our ability to attract new businesses. Business and persons of accumulated wealth are reportedly leaving the state in search of better tax climate. So how do we fix that?
There are people leaving, and I know of folks that are doing it. So to say that they're not is really not being fully disclosing the information. They are moving. We were projecting this big surplus, and we will already see that we're not collecting it. We are down in revenue, and so the surplus is spent, and it's kind of concerning to know that we might start the year in a deficit. So to say that people aren't moving, that things aren't changing, really the numbers are showing that that's not happening. We're not collecting the money we should be collecting. Also, it was really concerning to me to see an article on a St. Cloud business person who just won an award in North Dakota. Maybe we're seeing the companies here in Minnesota, but we're not seeing expansions in Minnesota like we had. We're seeing expansions in other states. They're not staying here to expand necessarily. Their plans are moving, and maybe they were in that direction, but I think they're moving in a bigger direction right now. Granted, we're going to see expansion in Minnesota, but not like I think we should be seeing. Folks are leaving. When you look at the numbers and you look at what your overhead costs are, and when we keep increasing those overhead costs by not only taxing but also raising other things, it's going to make a big difference to how people react as far as their giving. I would like to see some more information on what our nonprofits are saying. Are they getting the monies they need? That's very concerning to me. Everybody's saying money is really tight, and that comes from the fact that we're not letting businesses do what they do best, to be creative, to grow, to make money. And when they make money, it's a win-win for everyone. And I really think we need to get back to looking at making Minnesota a more friendly business state.
And Dan.
We live in a great state, and that's because of investments that we've made over time in our state. But great states don't just grow on trees. They have to be funded. Now, there are many different taxes and many different government levels that fund our different budgets. One tax I'm concerned about is the property tax. Now, just last night, I was out door knocking in St. Cloud in the neighborhood by McDonald's on Division, and I talked to a senior who mentioned that how happy she was that her property taxes went down this year. I'm very concerned through my real estate business about seniors who are living on fixed incomes who are forced out of their homes. That's a concern for me and for my business and for our community. Now, like I said, we have to find ways to invest in our community, but it's a level of priorities. I've talked to many people in our community who are affected by that fourth tier, and they're happy to chip in. They would rather chip in than make Grandma Mildred, who's living on a fixed income, paying property taxes when they increase, fund our budget and fund our investments and make our state great. My door will always be open to listen to the concerns of business leaders and finding a way to make a more competitive economic climate. But to have a great state, we need to make investments.
Thank you. All of you mentioned transportation, so we have a transportation question, and I was really happy to hear you all list this as your priority because I think it will be a big chamber priority locally and national or statewide as well as nationally this year. So transportation infrastructure in our state continues to decline. I think we all acknowledge that, even as all level of governments attempt to fill increasing funding gaps between what is needed and what we have money to do. The state of Minnesota has a major role to play in ensuring adequate transportation infrastructure for our citizens and businesses. So what's your solution to filling the funding gap on transportation? Jim, you're first up on this one.
Well, this, of course, is a complicated question, and I guess I'd bring up a couple of ideas. I won't say I know every last idea on it, but first of all, I think we need to look at efficiencies. The Department of Transportation promised that they were going to figure out a way to build our roads and bridges cheaper when they got the gas tax increase several years ago. They've been working on that, but we haven't seen a lot out of that so far. The cost of building a road or a bridge has gone up far faster than the general inflation rate if you go back over the last 15, 20 years. And part of it is different regulations and stuff that we put on our different contractors when we were building these projects. Example would be the Sauk Rapids Bridge, which the bridge project reportedly cost $56 million, but the actual cost of building the bridge itself was $15 million. Now, where'd all that other money go? Well, some of it goes to things that we actually, certainly do need. Right-of-way, studies for building the bridge, environmental studies, compensation to businesses. But I question some of those things. You're moving the bridge a few hundred feet. I mean, how much money do you really need to spend on environmental studies? You go back into where can we get additional money. The first place I would look is the bonding bill. As I mentioned, we had a $900-some million bonding bill last year. Only $35 million of it went to roads and bridges. We should be spending hundreds of millions of dollars in that bonding bill on roads and bridges. We really need to step things up in that area. So I guess I would start by saying efficiencies and figuring out how to build what we're building cheaper. Another way to look at that is the whole prevailing wage issue. By changing the prevailing wage laws in this state, we would also save some money. And secondly, the area of looking at the bonding bill and reprioritizing our money in that area.
Great, thank you. Zach?
We talk about efficiencies a lot, and MnDOT's been pinched everywhere they can. So I just want to point out that cost per mile for a road, we're still cheaper and more efficient than Wisconsin, North Dakota, and South Dakota. So we do a really good job, especially with the wild and crazy winters we have here. But yes, there are always more efficiencies. And MnDOT's pretty good at bringing them to us. And we've incorporated many of those. Funding will be, I'll agree, this is a complicated subject. We've relied on the gas tax for very long. You don't just hear this at the state level, but at the federal level. Cars are getting a better gas mileage. So we're losing that revenue and costs that are obviously going up. And then the bonding bill, we would have gone bigger, but we didn't have enough votes to do it. We could have made more investments. And I do believe that's where we're going to be headed. And we have to also be careful how we do that. We also have to get creative options. I've kind of taken heat from my side of the aisle sometimes for being a proponent of public-private partnerships. If we're going to build new roads, I'm willing to be flexible. I think that's an option in making things like that happen. But we do well. We do really good here in Minnesota. But we're falling behind, just like the rest of the nation, because of how to fund it. So we can get serious about it. We can talk about the gas tax. We know that's not a permanent solution. I think that needs to be left on the table if we're going to be serious about this. And whether it's more creative options, working with counties more closely, and fostering the trend of cities growing up, not out. That's what they're doing, and we need to roll with this. We need to invest in multimodal transportation. We need to get the train up here. People want to take it. They want to get off the roads. We can get more people off the roads and get more commerce on. So.
Dan?
My 7-year-old daughter isn't the only one noticing that we've got to invest in our transportation system. I've had countless conversations with people at their doors, frustrated with the gridlock in the roads. Businesses are hurting with the slowdown in commerce. And so we have got to increase our investment in our roads, in our bridges, and in cost-effective methods of mass transit, such as our bus system. Like Zach said, getting the train to St. Cloud, that's going to do a lot to unclog the congestion and free up commerce. As far as funding it goes, the gas tax is definitely one option. If we want to get serious about funding it, its value is diminished as cars become more fuel efficient. So there is that. Another thing is looking for more efficiencies in MnDOT. But again, that alone isn't going to solve our problem. Finding money in bonding is another way of funding this, but we need to explore all our options, and we need to be serious about working together. Republicans, Democrats, business leaders, 7-year-olds, everyone has a stake in our region's transportation future, and we need to make those investments.
Thank you. Tama.
I think one of the biggest issues is that I don't believe the state of Minnesota makes transportation a big priority. I think we need to look back to what the state really needs to do, and we need to stick on what our responsibilities constitutionally are to the state of Minnesota. Transportation is huge. We all know it. But I think we spend so much time spending money in any other way we can except for on transportation, and then transportation is left here and we all go, oh, dang, we should have put more money in it. It needs to be, first and foremost, one of our top 3 priorities. We're hearing it from just about everybody that we're not doing a good job, and we're not. I also think that, we look at, we have a lot of going back and forth between the metro and the greater Minnesota areas. Metro wants, their big share of money, and we keep trying to get more and more and more. That is a huge issue. We need to really make our voices a lot stronger, and I think getting a start on a 3rd lane to St. Cloud on Interstate 94 is a way that we're saying, hey, we really have a lot of needs out here and they're not being addressed, and we need to do this too. That continues to be a big fight, and we will do that. When we look at rail, there's a lot of problems right now with rails and in railroads and who's getting what. There's a lot of cars on there, and there isn't always a lot of availability of cars or tracks. So with that being said, we do have a informational joint meeting, the Commerce Committee and the Transportation Finance, I'm on Commerce, to already start looking at this, because we're going to have some issues already, we're pretty sure, with propane. We just don't have enough tracks and enough cars to accommodate everybody that wants to travel in that fashion. We really just need to make this a huge priority. We need to put the money there. It shouldn't be the second last thing on the agenda. It needs to be a top thing. We're hearing it from everyone. We're not doing a good job.
So are all of you willing to put it on top for us this year? Yes. I'm seeing nods. Okay. I'll be there talking to you guys. All right. Tama, you are back starting at this next question. It too is 2 minutes. Our chamber members and businesses at large cite increasing regulation at every level of government as a major impediment to their ability to expand and grow their businesses. An example of this is what's happened to Cold Spring Brewery in Cold Spring. DNR made a regulation regarding wells, and now they can't use their well, and they're going to have to close it, and it's a huge expense, and the city's involved, and I know some of you are familiar with that. I'm just using that as an example of only one, and there are regulations across the board depending on your industry. So what steps do you think are realistic to stop the growth of regulations and decrease the number of state regulations and mandates on businesses? And what do you personally, are you personally willing to do to improve the situation? And I'm assuming you think there's an issue. If you don't think there's an issue with it, you're welcome to state that too. So Tama, you begin that discussion, please.
I happen to know quite a bit about what's happening in Cold Spring simply because I sit next to Jeff Howe on the House floor. And Jeff has been working with us along with Tim O'Driscoll for quite a while. And I think what's most troublesome about this is it's simply interpretation. There was legislation passed that allowed the TNR to do an interpretation on trout streams, and that's how a large part of this started. It is such a complicated issue. And I think one of the most frustrating things is, is a business going to close because of interpretation? Or are we really going to look at what's happening? One of the interesting things that would happen if they would decide that 3rd Street or Cold Spring Brewery would need to move is that they're drawing out a lot of nitrates in their water. So if they no longer continue to do that, those nitrates will travel to the city water supply. And that is a huge concern. So I guess I'm not seeing a whole lot of, when I hear about this subject, of a lot of, you're looking at the big picture. I mean, really, what is best for the community? And is it really best for the community to close a business? And then they're going to have to, I mean, at the reports in the paper the other day, they're looking 2-3 years to get a water supply for the city. And that's if they can find something that's big enough. So it's really, really scary that we aren't seeing more discussion on when these mandates and regulations and such are put out. We're not looking at a bigger picture, or we're not sitting together. We're not getting the DNR together with other entities and saying, is this really in the best interest of everyone? And what data do you have that suggests that this truly is a trout stream? If you talk to the folks there, they're kind of like laughing about the whole thing because they haven't seen trout there for years. So we're doing all this regulation, and it doesn't seem like we have the most informed folks at the table helping to be there.
And I'm not just specifically talking about that one, and your comments can go more worldly as well. So yeah. Okay, Dan.
Well, as a realtor, I truly appreciate the value that our businesses have in creating jobs and drawing people into our community. There's nothing I love more than getting that call of somebody that's got a job here in our region and is looking to buy a home. So both from a professional standpoint and also from a community standpoint, our businesses need support from the legislature to be able to function and be able to create those jobs that create a great, thriving economy for us. So as a representative, my door will always be open to business owners and other folks in the community to explore different options that we can take, making sure that we're being reasonable with regulations and making sure that we can continue to support our businesses and have a good, thriving local economy.
Great, thank you. Zach?
We had the unsession. Of course, you might remember Governor Dayton talking about that. It didn't get as many headlines, but we removed about 1,100 laws, outdated regulations, and statutes off the books, and that was a big deal. Often overlooked. It made streamlined a lot of regulation processes. And we'll be talking about regulations forever, because every time company A, B, and C does something bad and the public complains and then we regulate it, then people complain about the regulations. So we're going to be talking about this forever. So we get the specifics. We go after the bad guys who do something bad and not punish everybody. Not making a one-size-fits-all regulation for just a couple of entities that did something out of line. So I think we can definitely work harder on that, on making the bad guys pay for what they've done, and not everybody. So we always continue working on that.
And Jim.
Well, when it comes to business, the tax climate is what everyone always talks about. But I would actually tell you, as a business person who's owned a business for 30 years, I think that if anything, the regulatory climate is more important than the tax climate. Yes, the tax climate is important, but here you've got an example of a business that may be forced out of business, not because of the tax climate, because of the regulatory climate. This stream in Cold Spring I find interesting. My parents had a cabin on Big Fish Lake when I was a kid. I used to bike over that stream, and later I was drive over that stream. I can't ever recall seeing a trout in that stream. And anyone who's been out there knows that that stream is about as wide as this table here. I mean, this is not some big, flowing, pristine trout stream as it goes by the Cold Spring Brewery. I think that our regulatory rules that we pass, too often we just have a one-size-fits-all perspective on it. And I think for one thing, we should implement a law or pass a law that says when they're putting a new regulation in effect, we have a estimate of some kind of how much this is going to be and a budget for how much we're going to spend on regulations this year. And it's not just the Cold Spring Brewery. It's also just even getting an answer. I remember when I was in the legislature, like 10 years ago now, I got, or I was shown some copper from what they were proposing to mine up in northern Minnesota at this Polymet mine. And they started talking about how they were going to try to open this mine and all the jobs it was going to create. Well, here, 10 years or more later, these folks are still waiting to see whether or not they can get a permit to open their mine. I mean, how many of you would make a new investment if you needed to get a permit and wait 10 years to see what your answer would be? I can't believe these people are still even hanging around Minnesota looking to do this. We've really got to make some changes in the regulatory environment in this state.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now to an easier topic, healthcare. That was a little joke. This is 2 minutes, and Dan, you'll start this discussion. What's your assessment of our state healthcare exchange, MNsure? And what do you believe needs to be done moving forward to ensure Minnesota stays in the lead nationally in healthcare?
We've made some positive strides on healthcare here in Minnesota. One story that really sticks out to me is I met a woman named Kathy while out door knocking. And Kathy lives in the southern part of town, South St. Cloud. And Kathy used to be denied health coverage because she has a pre-existing condition. So she was paying 5 figures annually for her health care costs. And as you can imagine, that would cause some serious economic hardship. But now, thanks to the progress that's been made, Kathy is able to get health insurance. The insurance companies can no longer discriminate against her. And because of that, she's now able to stay in her home and is able to retire at age 65. So Kathy's just one of many success stories I've heard here in our community. The problems with the rollout were frustrating for sure on the website, but it's getting better, and we need to continue to build off those success stories. Let's be honest. Obamacare is a law of the land. I wasn't in Congress when it passed. Neither my opponent nor I are running for Congress. We can sit here and bicker about a federal issue till we're blue in the face. But that's not what people in our community really want. They want us to work together for real solutions, like the Minnesota way, like we did back in 2008 with the Minnesota Health Reform Act, where we did a lot for administrative efficiencies, chronic care management, all kinds of things for payment, transparency. It was passed by a DFL legislature, signed by a Republican governor, Tim Pawlenty, both sides working together to find real solutions for our state. That's the Minnesota way, and that's how I'll tackle this issue in the legislature.
Tama.
I would love to tell you a little bit more about MNsure, but quite frankly, we didn't talk about it but one time on the House floor last year, and that was to basically move the date of releasing the new rates from October to after the election season. That was about all we heard. We had asked many times in the Commerce Committee, who our chair is Representative Joe Atkins, who introduced the legislation, if we could have some kind of informational meeting. And it was like, yep, we should do that. And it never happened. So it's really frustrating for me to talk about it, because the only thing I can tell you is what I'm hearing from folks. Yes, there are some success stories, but I will tell you that my son and his wife have applied for it. They have been trying now for quite a long time. They got married last April. What they're seeing when they do get online and when they can get some answers is that their monthly premium would be $200. Great, with a deductible of $10,000. That's not doable. And that is what we're hearing from some of the doctors, is they're having patients sitting in their office saying, well, why aren't they paying for it? And quite frankly, they don't know. They don't know what the deductible is, and they've never had deductibles like this before. And so really the information that was going out wasn't very good. I've known what a deductible is for a long time. We've always paid our own health care. And so the deductible was a large part of our conversation, but I'm not seeing that with MNsure. We're also seeing some frustrations, even with doctors themselves, in getting their employees health care. That to me is really a sad story, when our doctors are even saying it's too expensive for us to do for our employees. I think we're looking in a really sad place right now. Minnesota was doing a wonderful job of health care, and I really think we've taken a really good product and we've muddied it up a lot. If we would have taken Minnesota as a model and expanded on that, I think we would be in a much better place right now.
Jim, comments on MNsure?
Well, there's been a lot of problems with MNsure. I won't say that there's not someone out there who's been helped by it. Clearly there has. But first of all, if you look at MNsure, the vast majority of people who have been signed up for it were people who were already eligible for existing health care programs we had. They were already eligible for Medicaid. They were already eligible for Minnesota Care. So this isn't something, even though there may be a lot of new people that signed up for it, that they got anything out of MNsure. They were already eligible for these programs. However, if you look on the negative side, there are thousands of people who are perfectly happy with the health care they have that have now been forced to lose their health care. And I've run into people in the thousands of doors I've knocked who said, yep, I was happy with my health care. I lost it. I can't find something now that fits because, as Tama was saying, the deductible is too high or some other reasons. And then you've got the whole issue of, we have spent $100-some million on a website that doesn't work. This is going to force school districts to spend $200 million more on health insurance that they haven't been spending it on, taking it away from our kids in the public school system. We've given bonuses to these people who were running the MNsure system back before we found out that it wasn't even working at all and they really didn't deserve the bonus. Premiums are forecasted to increase very significantly when they come out for this next year. There's really a lot of problems with the system that we've got, and frankly, by and large, it's been a big failure. I wouldn't say it's not, like I said, there's not a few people out there that have been helped. There have certainly been people that have been helped, but there are people that have been harmed too. And we had a pretty good healthcare system in Minnesota. In terms of pre-existings, we had the MCHA program that helped people with pre-existing conditions. I wouldn't say that some of these programs that we had didn't need some tweaking, but we were down to something like 8% of the people in the state that didn't have health care. And remember, even when you've got laws saying they have to have it, you've got 10% of the people out there who are supposed to have driver's insurance that don't have insurance on their cars.
Thank you. And Zach, your views on MNsure?
Well, you can't have change without anxiety, and the Affordable Care Act was probably the largest legislative change most of us have seen in our lifetime. And MNsure took the best of that, and I think in our worlds did better. Several years ago, Governor Plenty cut what was called general assistance medical care. It was the basic, bare bones medical care for some of the people I worked with. When that happened, under a GOP House, they just needed just a few votes to override his veto, and they could have saved some lives. One client of mine had diabetes and schizophrenia. It was always a struggle for him to just keep his insurance rolling, keep those meds going. And when they took general assistance medical care away, he fell behind on all of that. And long story short, he died due to the complications of not taking his medications. That's happening much more or less right now. People are getting quality care who had no care before. My clients are showing up because they have something in place. And when they show up, they get better. They get back into the workforce. We have about 5% uninsured rate. And yeah, this is a huge change. And you can't have change without anxiety, okay? Even if it's for the better. And it's going to be complicated and frustrating for a while. But I think MNsure took the best of this really complicated, awkward Obamacare situation. And yes, we were doing better than most states before, and now we're doing better than all of them.
Okay, we're going to shift a little bit. This is still about healthcare, but I have a couple of questions on labor here and then closing comments unless something comes forward from the audience. So feel free to hand it off here. Zach, you'll start with this one. Last year, the Minnesota Nurses Union, supported by the National Nurses Union, backed a bill that sets patient-to-nurse ratios, staffing ratios in Minnesota hospitals. That bill may come back in 2015 and is critical to our St. Cloud Hospital and its ability to continue as a national top-performing hospital to keep staffing-related decisions with nurse leaders and nurses in hospitals. So what's your view of setting nurse staffing ratios legislatively?
I was one of a few Democrats who opposed the ratio mandate in committee and forced it to go back to a conversation. And what negotiated was a study that's going to be out there. Our hospital rocks, and I'm proud to go down there and point out, hey, here's something you should look at. Central Care St. Cloud Hospital. So I'm very fearful of any kind of one-size-fits-all approach. And even though I voted against that, as you saw in the paper, I still have the Minnesota Nurse Association endorsement. I think is because of my background in healthcare, and I support the people's right to organize. But I don't want anything that's going to take away from the quality care that St. Cloud Hospital provides, and then and other rural hospitals. We don't need to pay the price for some hospitals that don't have their stuff together. But it is important. There's some hospitals that struggle a lot, and what they need to look at is why is the turnover so high? What do they need to do? Of course, everybody will bring up HCMC, and we know they serve probably the most vulnerable and complex population. A hospital like that is going to have turnover. And other hospitals in more rural areas than this are going to have turnover simply because they're losing population. So we're going to take a look at that study, and I don't think it's going to suggest a one-size-fits-all approach. I'm not a big supporter of that.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, the study just kicked the ball down the road for a year, and then it's going to be back. And this is a very big question for our community and for the entire state as well. And yes, the various associations that are involved here are pushing this issue very hard on the nurses' side. You know, I guess to me, I'm opposed to the idea of mandating staff ratios, and a big reason is technology. You've got all kinds of technological changes going on in the medical world in particular. If you go ahead and implement a particular staffing ratio now, who's to say that 2 years from now, 4 years from now, whenever, you're not going to have some new piece of technology that means that that's not applicable anymore? You've got all sorts of technology out there right now that didn't exist 10 years ago that's already made it easier for nurses to look over more people than they once did. This really has to be a case-by-case basis for the hospitals. I mean, certainly everyone wants us to have enough nurses so that everyone is being adequately monitored, but there are so many variables involved in terms of, you know, what sort of condition or disease or sickness or illness each person has, how old are they, how fragile are they. You know, to go ahead and say we're going to set this particular ratio in law when you've got all sorts of different patients of different ages and different conditions that are affected really strikes me as way too much of a top-down mandate. And these are the decisions I think that our hospitals and our healthcare workers should be making themselves as they deal with the situations that they face.
Thank you. Tama?
Minnesota should absolutely stay out of the business of the hospitals and how they run best. They know. We don't know. Down in the legislature, we don't have a clue what works best for the hospital. And if I'm there, or my mom or dad is there, I want them to have the best care and not look at it later in retrospect and say, man, that care just wasn't what it used to be. And then you find out it's because of something as simple as staffing ratios. We don't have any business messing around with those things. We were talking about regulations and mandates. We're not medical professionals. We don't know what happens, and we certainly shouldn't be mandating anything to do with staffing ratios. That is the business of the hospital. And I think they've got enough on their plate right now with all the different regulations and mandates that they need to do. And I just don't see us supporting it, especially in this area, because we heard very big numbers from the nurses in St. Cloud saying we are not for this at all. We know what happens. We should be able to make the decisions. Things happen on the fly. I think there was an instance or there was an example of if there's a catastrophe, if something happens, they might not be staffed because of the staffing ratio. And what do you do and how do you go around that? There were a lot of questions that were brought forth because of it. And quite frankly, I don't want to be responsible for lessening the care that we receive right now. We need to stay away from it. It really isn't good legislation.
Thank you. Dan?
We've got a very good thing going here with our hospital in St. Cloud, and I know for a fact that frontline staff are working with administrators to make sure that patient safety is a top priority. I look forward to seeing the results of that study, but I know that one size absolutely does not fit all. And as a national leader here, other hospitals throughout the country would do well to take a look at what we're doing. And as a legislature, we'd do well to support that.
Thank you. I did get an audience question. We'll cover that after this last one that I have prepared. And that is on minimum wage, because it was such a big deal last year when the minimum wage bill was passing. And I think whenever Speaker Representative Paul Thiessen was here last week, he indicated that he did not expect that to be repealed in any way. But there are two issues, one related to the indexed inflationary factor, and the tip credit issue that may be talked about this year. Can you talk about where you stand on those two items? We'll start with, I mixed this up, so it's going to be hard. Jim.
Well, I think as a general rule, we shouldn't be putting automatic inflationary increases into state government law. There's a few exceptions at the federal level. You've got Social Security. I'm fine with that. But for us to say, we're automatically going to be giving out inflationary increases, whether it be in spending, which we do at the state level in some areas, or whether it be in a area like this. We don't know what the economy is going to be like. We don't know what labor conditions are going to be like. We don't know what situations are out there. This should be something that's done on a case-by-case basis, as it has been, and not put on automatic pilot. In terms of the tip credit, I support the idea of a tip credit. I think that, the concept behind the minimum wage is that everyone should make at least so many dollars an hour. And right now with the tip credit, which you've got for restaurants, is you make so many dollars an hour plus tips. Now, no waiters or waitresses that I know are getting rich. They're hardworking people, and I respect the work they do. But the concept behind a minimum wage is that it should be a certain minimum wage. And I've heard from a lot of restaurant owners and people who are involved in businesses where they have tipped employees, and it's not just restaurant owners, it's other businesses too, that this is having a huge effect on their business. And I know of people that are actually thinking of closing their businesses or relocating their businesses out of state because of this.
Thank you. Zach, would you like to address that, please?
Sure. Just so you know, the inflationary factor on the minimum wage is kind of meant there is capped at 2%. So even if inflation rises more than 2%, is still the most you're going to get is 2%. Now, why do that? To kind of help end the conversation, so you can plan. Otherwise, you come back and have this debate about minimum wage over and over and over and over. It would be nice if we had something that matched up more closely with the federal minimum wage. But yeah, the cost of living here in Minnesota is a little more expensive. We also have a more higher educated population that is going into a workforce in a service-based economy. Many college graduates here in the St. Cloud area work 2 or 3 part-time jobs as their full-time job. I can tell you that at my restaurant, I've had a couple people be able to leave their part-time job and work for us full-time. And there's a career for them. This is a shift that I think we may all have to make, is with the service-based economy, we're not making anything, there are very few widgets. We're getting in Minnesota, we're getting good at high-tech manufacturing, and that field is growing a little bit. However, if we're a service-based economy, especially here in St. Cloud, people need to afford to be able to make a living wage without having to work 2 or 3 part-time jobs. And that's why I supported it. You say tip credit, you're going to turn everybody off. What was on the table there was something called the tiered wage. I supported that. It didn't pass, and I'm pretty sure that'll be part of the conversation as we go forward. But I like the fact that a couple of my employees no longer have to work that other part-time job. If it was up to me, I would have paid them more earlier, but as part of a team, of course, a business decision. And we have quality employees who are helping our place just be better than it was.
Dan.
While door knocking, I've had a lot of conversations with people in our community who live on a minimum wage income, and they have to make some tough choices every day. Do we buy some groceries? Do we get the car repaired? Those are the kinds of choices that people on a minimum wage income have to make. Now, as a state, we haven't raised the wage in almost 10 years, since 2005. And there are a lot of people, a lot of families in our community that are still hurting from the Great Recession. But with the minimum wage increase, that's putting more money in the pockets of more Minnesotans, which will go right back into our local businesses. The people that live on minimum wage income, they can't afford to save their money or do anything else with it. They've got to spend it. It goes right back into our economy. Here in Minnesota, we believe that hard work should pay off. And as a legislator, my door will always be open to people in this room, members of the business community. So as we implement this law, we're exploring ways to make it have the best competitive economic climate. That's how I'll approach this issue.
And Tama, final comments on minimum wage.
I think the inflationary component is going to be very worrisome, and I think we're going to hear a lot, and we'll probably have some discussions surrounding that. With the 2-tier system and the tip credit, we definitely heard very early on the conversation of how worrisome that was going to be, and that it really wasn't going to work very well. We were hearing immediately, folks would come in my office and they would have data on, this is how much everything's going to go up in price. It's like, we can't support this. And I'm a believer too, that if you encourage growth in your economy, wages follow. I just think that's part of what happens. I know that in our business, when we were healthier, when we were growing, part of what we would do was to also honor our employees by giving them a raise. It's really hard to force people to do it when you don't. Again, if we keep adding on to overhead costs, what's left over truly isn't enough to do what you want to do. And so I think when we look at the tip credit, that's something I think we do need to have a conversation on that. I think it's worthy of it. We were hearing that immediately. I've been hearing from some folks that they've cut some positions, they've increased hours or decreased hours. They were just basically trying to make it so that they could continue to be in business, offer prices for their dinners at what the market would support. There's a lot of planning that goes in with things like this. When you just put it on a business, they don't have time to prepare. I think I just really believe we'll have some more work to do when we get back in January.
Okay, then we have an audience question. In view of the time, we'll give a minute and a half to this one. And Tama, you'll start. Please give one specific example of what the legislature can do to make Minnesota more economically competitive. Difficult question.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Tama, are you thinking? Did I tell you start this one? Okay, well, Tama, I'm sitting here going, wow, she's thinking hard about that.
I can hear my
Tama, yes, would you start that? A specific example of what the legislature can do to make Minnesota more economically competitive.
We can do a better job of talking to each other and making some better legislation so it's just not one side or the other. We really need to get more balance, and I think with us working together, better legislation comes out. We're talking about individual issues, and it's a huge deal, but unless we agree as a team, a lot of this doesn't follow through. I mean, it just doesn't come out as that we're working together for a better Minnesota. We've either got one side or the other. I really believe us working together better is what, getting more balance is what makes Minnesota more attractive.
Great, thank you. Sorry for that confusion. Dan.
One thing I'd like to do as our legislator to make our state more competitive and to attract more people to our state is invest in our education. I know that I've talked to a lot of families that are excited about the possibility of early childhood education programs. As a dad and as a classroom volunteer, it's important when we are investing in our K-12 education system. As a realtor, the top thing the families ask me is, where's the neighborhood with the best schools? Where can we send our kids to get the best education? That's the number one issue that folks ask me about is education. I also know investing at the higher education level is very important to make us competitive. More and more jobs are requiring higher education degrees. To remain competitive both in our community and as a state, we've got to be investing in our higher education, making sure that we have a skilled and well-trained workforce. That's going to make us more economically competitive. That's going to attract people to our state, and that's the best place we can be investing is in our schools and in our kids and in our future.
Thank you. Zach.
But over 143 companies over the past year have either expanded or made plans for major expansion. Almost all of them cited the primary reason, or some of them who have opened up shop here, Gary and Hoff, you hear about why did they come here? It was because of our educated workforce. And this has been part of Minnesota's history. I believe it's what put us on the map. The University of Minnesota, the people who settled here, knew that they needed something to do in the winter. And they chose that something to be educating their children and themselves. So we've got a lot of catching up to do as far as higher ed goes. But we also do amazing things. I don't know if anybody knows what a neutrino beam is, but the University of Minnesota actually has a neutrino beam catcher. It's complicated, crazy, awesome stuff. And to know that that is being done here in Minnesota is amazing. People come here, they look here, they choose here because we have had this historic investment that we took a break from making for about 10 years, in my opinion. We played a little bit of catch up last year, and I think we need to continue being the brain power state because that's how we have historically, and I think in the future we'll continue to attract quality businesses that are looking towards the future.
Great, thank you. And Jim, final comments.
Well, can you repeat the question? You wanted one item?
One specific example of what the legislature can do to make Minnesota more economically competitive.
Well, actually, I could give you a whole bunch of them. We can start talking about transportation like we talked about before and investing in our transportation system again. And, improving I-94, so you've got 3 lanes up to St. Cloud, doing some building and improving of the transportation in the Twin Cities. So we've got a beltway that is, I think, not the only one left in the country that only has 2 lanes on part of it. There's a lot of transportation infrastructure that we should be improving and building upon that would make ourselves much more economically competitive here. But I could go on. I could talk about regulatory issues, education issues. One thing that really hasn't been talked about education much is, we've historically had a very good school system here, both K-12 and higher education. And we still show up good in many ways. But we also have the largest achievement gap in the country between minorities and whites, particularly down in the Twin Cities. But it's not all that great here either. We need to make some improvements in that area. There's a lot of things that could be done, but I think increasing the tax credits that are available for people that have children in public and private schools to foster more school choice would be something that would help all people, and particularly those that are disadvantaged.
Thank you. And we will go into closing comments, and they're going to be short, just a minute, so that we end in our time frame. I'm going to start the closing comments with Dan.
I'm a dad. I'm a football coach. I'm a volunteer with a passion for our community. I have a real estate business, which I work with a variety of businesses and families from all walks of life. And let's face it, I'm also young. But we here in central Minnesota actually have a tradition of sending young legislators with energy and enthusiasm to our legislature from both parties. Bernie Oman, Larry Hosh, Doug Sting, Dave Greenis, all are legislators with energy, with passion for our community, who have gotten results for us. I'm running for state representative because I have that energy and I have that passion, but I also know that it's important for me to listen. I've got a lot to learn, and that's why I've been listening to people at their doors. There are many faces in this room who have tolerated my presence at their door and shared with me their goals for our community. So it also involves not just listening, but taking action. So if you live in District 14A, I'm asking for your vote to send me to the legislature to tackle our community's real priorities.
Tama.
Having been from the area for 34 years, I have a really good understanding of how St. Cloud works. And I also have a vision of how I think St. Cloud should work as well. I know a lot of people. We've been a part of the community, whether it be the church we belong to, the organizations we've belonged to. We've always been involved with our children and what's going on. And it's always been a great pleasure to be able to sit back and say, hey, I helped with that. It truly is a great feeling. I love the community. I love being down there and helping St. Cloud as much as I can. Also Way Park in St. Augusta. It just really feels like a good fit. This is where I need to be. I'm enjoying it. It's just a good feeling knowing that I now am in a position where I serve St. Cloud. It's amazing. It's been a treat meeting folks at the door, but I'm also hearing a lot of encouragement too. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim.
Well, first of all, I would say I really do think I know and I love this community. I was born and raised here. I chose to come back with my wife after Janet and I met 20-some years ago down in the Twin Cities. We've chosen to raise our family here, and I'm very active in the volunteer efforts of this community because I really do care about people and really care about our community. I also think that I really bring a business perspective to the legislature. I've owned a small business of one kind or another for 30 years. These days I spend most of my time in real estate, but I also owned a printing and mailing company here in the St. Cloud area once upon a time. I've also worked in the medical device field and the technology field. I think I really have a good grasp on what it takes to create good jobs. I've got the experience of having served in the legislature. I've got the seniority that I will get if I go back. And finally, I think, I have a reputation as being an independent thinker who will listen to everyone and really do what is right for our area. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you. And our final comments today will be with Zach Dorholt.
I just want to thank you, Teresa, for having us, and especially to the Rotary, and a special thanks for the Lake George thing. As a musician, I always find that super awesome. Living within walking distance with 2 young kids is an amazing thing what you've done for our community. Our community, Minnesota's 6th Congressional District, there are 25 legislators who live there. I'm the only Democrat. I have to listen. I go to forums where I'm always in the minority as far as the legislators at the table. In the first 2 years, I chief authored more than 50 pieces of legislation, and not because I was trying to author a bunch of legislation, but because I was trying to do things not just for my district, but for the St. Cloud area. I worked hard to help folks out in Sauk Rapids, got some things in the bonding bill for neighbors who didn't even vote for it. And I don't mind that. That's okay. I like being a team player. And I want to go back and continue to do that. So I ask you to look at how much I was able to do in just 2 years. And I'm going to work just as hard, if not harder, to continue that progress.
Great. Well, I want to help me thank all of our candidates today.